Well, I just hit the record button. Yeah, thanks for the reminder. So tonight on Fishbowl Live. So if you don't know Fishbowl, it's like Clubhouse, and LinkedIn had a baby. It's Clubhouse, but like the professional version. And Tim and I have been invited to speak on there on a regular basis. And this is really our first event. And tonight we're talking about sales, which is always a hot topic with owners. So if you want to jump into that, is it on your social feed, Tim? I know it's on mine. If you click on my LinkedIn or my Instagram.
I can even share, if you give me the ability to, I can share a little graphic to make it look really official too, if you want.
Share away.
Look at this.
It's you.
Look at us. Whoo, Fishbowl Live.
It's like you planned to do that all along.
I actually didn't, but it just happened to be on my desktop because I uploaded it to LinkedIn recently. So there it is.
By the way, in our defense, I did not come up with that title because I'm like, wow, that is really salesy, but whatever. We do love talking about sales. So if you join us on Fishbowl Live, it'll be a really good conversation, and it'll be not just me and Tim, it'll be the people showing up that we talk with. So we'll see some of you tonight.
That is tonight at 8 p.m. Eastern. So just a couple hours from now.
I think it's 7 p.m. even. Is that what I saw?
It's at 8 p.m.
Okay. You
better be there on time, Joel.
8 p.m. Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
It's 7 o'clock your time. That's why.
Roger that. Okay, well, let's get started with our weekly briefing. Am I appropriately spotlighted? And you are, Tim? I think we are. Okay, good. So I'll just start things off by saying welcome. It is Thursday, July the 29th, and this is your weekly briefing. The weekly briefing is that time we get together each week, people from revCommunity, to hear the latest in the industry, talk about the hot topic of the week, or share trends and so forth. And that's really the topic for today. We're going to look at some of the numbers that we're seeing based on all of the second quarter data that we're now taking a look at and trying to see some of the patterns. We've also got some anecdotes that we will share. By the way, I should share my screen so that everyone says, wait, what's our topic again? Unpacking Q2 industry metrics. So Tim, let's start with this. Do you want to share maybe just an anecdote or two that we've come across that really tipped us off to start us asking the question, like, okay, wait, is this just random? Are these just outliers, or is there actually a trend happening here?
Yeah, I'll get into the trend in a second because it's a little technical, not too crazy technical, but I'll just explain what we do internally to get to some of these trends that we see so people know. As you know, we do a lot of one-on-one engagements. We also have some kind of large and group engagements. And along the way, what we do is help business owners by doing quarterly reports, other types of briefings, and CREOS engagements. So we have a scale or a scope of different types of businesses, clients, and ownerships. When we do that and we collect it quarterly, because we do these quarterly reviews, we often, as we build these reports, our minds start to see different trends. And we then take the time to analyze that to figure out, like, are we looking at a pattern or something that's sensitive that we should bring up? And that's how we got to this item today. It was a little bit of something like a little itch that I had. And then these other questions that I'm receiving from business owners over the last month or so. And honestly, some engagements and some negotiations I've been part of with some of these business owners and their employees that made me really think, like, we should really discuss what this means, and specifically the decisions you should make as a business owner if this is happening to you. So that's what we're going to talk about today.
And let me encourage folks, if you didn't see the Q1 industry metrics, that's inside revCommunity. You can go back and watch that replay. There we talked about different numbers than we're going to be talking about today. But I think everyone here would appreciate seeing some of that data just to see how you compare in terms of where am I at for revenue based on the category or the vertical I'm in, things like the splits, profits, margins, that kind of thing. So that's available to you.
And we can do that again. If that's a good thing to show, we do that again. It just takes us a couple more weeks to compile that portion of the data. This one was a very specific item. So we micro focused on it for the last few days to get this analysis done.
So I will just say this, Tim, that I know for me personally, this is very just anecdotal, that with a handful of owners, different clients, I've heard this, oh, we are re-upping this person's annual deal, renegotiating salary, we're hiring this new person. And I just started hearing this whole, yeah, what's up with, is this number fair, right? An owner asking me like, have you heard about this? And does that seem right? And I'm like, no, not quite. No, we're not going to pay that much. And, you know, you hear something third time, fourth time, fifth time, you start thinking, wait, is something else going on? What's your take on that, or your version of it?
Yeah, there's definitely a dynamic shift taking place in the marketplace. So that's really the thought of like what it takes to acquire talent and what it takes to run your business. And why we asked today for this to be a registered event is we're about ready to dive into certain roles that you have in your company. And we didn't want every salesperson and producer or whatever to start seeing these numbers and start changing the dynamics that way. What we want to be able to do is look at these key people that you have in your business and talk about what it takes to make decisions inside your business if this is happening to you. But Joel, if you show, why don't you show them the overview picture of the direct and indirect splits that we've averaged out over the last from last year to this year, so we can talk about the big picture item and then how to drill down to the line items we're going to talk about specifically today.
Well, as I do that, I'm just going to also show this. If any of you are reading the news, you're seeing all of this talk about things like inflation and the CPI spiking and prices increasing in various categories and so forth. So in a strange way, we're all in this together. This is part of the larger narrative in which we find ourselves. But Tim, here is what you were asking about. And let's see, here we go.
Yeah. So I'm going to start with this. You're right. What we're seeing in the news is really an increase of prices. The easiest one that we can all see on a daily basis are the price of gasoline at the pumps. It seems to have gone up. And really simply put, when the price of gasoline goes up, all consumer goods go up because it costs more money to get that item to your door. So your internal housing costs are going to go up. And so how do we compensate for that? Especially as business owners, we have to provide the income to these families to pay for those goods, those consumer goods. And therefore that crunch kind of can show up on your doorstep. Here's something that we're noticing in this trend here. And I'll just point out what we're really looking at here. The first two items that we're looking at here are just the revenue. And what we've done is corrected the revenue. So we have a one-to-one comparison. The light blue is last year's numbers for the first 6 months. And then this year's numbers for the first 6 months. So the dark blue is this year, the light blue is last year. And we corrected the revenue, so we have a one-to-one ratio. I'm going to point to these items here first. These indirect costs year over year have gone down, and that's really good news for us. I think some of the reason that that's gone down is very obvious. Our overhead costs, like rent, for a lot of, as an average, have gone down for people or disappeared. Some of the internal operational structures have gone away because people are functioning at home. And what we've been working with at the pandemic has a little bit of gain in this indirect category, and people have gained money. There's more available money because that indirect cost has been there. And maybe you saw that last year on your tax returns when you realized you made more profit than you usually do. So that's all a real big benefit to the employer as they're doing that work. But here's what I want to look at. You'll also look at here, these two numbers here. This is the margin, or the profit, what's left over after those costs. On a year-to-year basis, there actually isn't any more money. So what the gain is in this spot right here did not transfer to this spot right here. So the savings that business owners should have had is actually transferred somewhere else. And where that's transferred, very obviously, are these direct costs. So specifically speaking, an indirect cost are your overhead items, your rent, your staff people that are overhead, maybe even you as a business owner. You didn't take out any more money, or you might have cut back yourself in money. So those indirect costs went down. Direct costs are costs that you expenses that you have to satisfy your client's contracts or costs directly related to doing your contracts. So when we move our indirect costs savings to our direct category, what we're really doing is giving the client more than they paid for. Now, that's, you know, nice to say, like, wouldn't it be nice to be able to cut back those costs? But our clients are currently asking for the same thing they've always asked for. So there must be something happening in this direct category where prices have increased to do the same work we've already done. And the business owner, therefore, is losing the margin they should have gained in indirect costs and giving it back to their client to correct the need and spend the money somewhere else. So that's the trend we've seen, and it's a little disturbing. The reason it's disturbing is these indirect costs will eventually correct themselves, but it's hard to correct the indirect costs. And basically now that's going to affect your margin.
Or do you
And
mean
the margin is what you need to run your business to be a viable business.
Well, Tim, I'm sort of vicariously hearing you say all this through the minds of the people here. And it's like when you say, oh, we gave it to the clients, that's interesting because I think most owners think, well, I don't really have a choice, right? The clients expect what they expect. They hired us. They expect a certain deliverable. So I really don't have any choice except to pay what it costs to get those projects done. What would you say to that?
That's right. So what we're seeing is the decision we have to make is we'll give us the same money to get the same result that we had last year, but it's costing us more money for those same results. So the first place to correct it is if the cost of goods go up, the cost to the consumer, in this case your client, should also go up. Much like if the price of gas goes up, the price of lettuce is going to go up also, and you're going to pay for it at Trader Joe's. Trader Joe's is not taking the bite for your lettuce, no pun intended. You shouldn't take a bite for the cost of goods to go up for your client as well.
Well, and this is where maybe we remind everyone here that for most everybody here, the deliverables, like the product, right? We're delivering creative, and these deliverables, whether it's spots or promos or whatever, is highly subjective. And we have this enormous, luxury or capability to shift the creative, shift how we execute, shift the client expectations, come up with a better, smarter, more clever idea that's actually less costly to produce. And we get to take advantage of that. Obviously easier said than done, but is that, Tim, is that where you would point people perhaps to start exploring how to manage those direct costs better?
Yeah, I feel like you just set me up for my next slide, Joel. It's almost like you know what's coming next and you just set me up to go right into what I need to go.
Well, is that my tip to go to the next slide?
That's your tip. You have to stop sharing the screen so I can
Okay.
You missed that cue. Stop sharing the screen cue. Here, let me control the screen because I'll share with you this form that you have here, but I'll kind of show it live from my screen. It's exactly right. The question is like, really, how do we manage that then? If that's a possibility that we have some control over these costs, where is it managed? So here's specifically why I wanted it to not only be business owners today. There's a very specific trend I'm gonna show you, and it's a heavy decision maker in your company. This is just a basic format. These are very average numbers. Please don't base what you're paying your ACD based off what I put here. I really just put this for example purposes. I try to make it somewhat realistic so you believe me, but this is some of the reality we're up against. So keep in mind, I've dumbed down our factors report, and I really focused here on just the direct expenses. But for a reminder, here's your total revenue for a company. In this case, it's 2 million. And we have these direct expenses, which are expenses related to getting a project done. So this is where the money goes that are directly related. Your indirect expenses, your rent, benefits, owner salaries, what have you, are also lined out like that, but I've scrunched it here. And you can see lastly, the margin, which is your revenue minus your expenses equals your margin. That's just an overview of what we're looking at here. What we've done is, because the direct costs went up, we did an analysis like, where is this going? And again, Joel, I've been part of enough conversations recently to ask the question, hey, I'm curious, am I right? Am I seeing something specifically? And when I drilled down to these line items, what I discovered was it's actually this line item right here, producers, where the costs have increased the greatest. What has happened is, for some reason in the marketplace, producers are becoming more bold and asking for more. In a lot of cases, look at what's happening here. The direct percentage right now is 51% of the cost of this company. When these numbers increase, that will increase the demand on this direct. And specifically, these line items, producer line items, and that's like a senior producer, regular producer, junior producers even. The costs for these have gone up nearly 30%. The new demand is, I was part of a conversation recently where a junior producer asked over $130,000 a year to be a junior producer. And a senior producer had a proposal one of my clients gave that was way more elevated, way beyond $150,000 a year, was actually turned down to accept a job at over $200,000 a year. So there's something happening in this marketplace alone, in these producer marketplace alone, that has increased drastically. The others haven't seemed to respond yet, but specifically in the marketplace. And when I correct this to 130% cost, that 51% became 53%. So just like the previous slide, the trend moved, those costs increased. I spending it in the direct category, and my margin went down from 11% to 8%. This is what business owners are up against. So that's the trend we're seeing, and that's specifically what's happening. But let's correct it. Let's go with the question that you asked. Here's the way the factors method works, and we want you to understand. One thing you could do to correct this number is actually get more from your client. So same amount of work, get more revenue, and that corrects that percentage too. So $2 million to 200 to just a 10% increase. So charge your clients 10% more, and then those numbers fix themselves again. So you have to be bold as a business owner to make that decision and basically tell your clients, I'm passing the cost on to you, because that's where it's going to come from. So that's the first way to correct it. Just increase your revenue, not increase the workload, and you can fix that problem. That's step one.
By the way, that's actually very doable. I'm smiling because that's like one of my favorite, I don't want to call it tricks, but there's actually methods and psychology and other things you can use to actually do that. It's not just like, oh, I'm just going to change the number and hope that they say yes.
Yeah, right. It's in the presentation. Use a simple line presentation instead of a breakdown. You talk about the value proposition, not the line by line. Many of those things we talk about all the time. This is where that practice, if you're good at it, you can actually get those results, and it will correct itself. So that is one way of correcting itself and getting the same margin return you're looking for. And by the way, your total dollar amount would go up. This was 220 at 11%. Now I'm making 239. So that 11% is more as you have more reward. All that really is nice, and it corrects itself. But here's also how the method works. I'll point this out. I'll put the 2 million. The other thing works here, but I've seen. So what I need to do is these items, these freelancers, equipment costs, these things.
Oh, are you there, Tim? Did we lose Tim?
This is where you need a technical difficulty card, Joel.
Yeah, no doubt. I'm like, I think I'm live, but I think we lost Tim. Is anyone else seeing Tim? Maybe he's he dropped. Yeah, where's that technical difficulties little button? Well, I'll make myself spotlit while we wait for Tim to come back. Here we go. No Tim, not seeing Tim. We lost Tim. I guess that answers my question. All right, bear with me. There we go. Hey, Tim, welcome
Did
back.
we lose you or did you lose me?
I think we lost both of us for a second. I'm going to add your spotlight back. Okay.
Thank you.
Do your screen share again.
There's a buzzkill for you. Like I was right at the delivering the climax of the speech, and there we go. Okay, no. Here, let me share my screen again so I can make that final point. Okay, so coming back to this again. So what these line items here at the top are variable items. It's really the thought of the commitment you're making to the client to get the work done. And if the client is unwilling to give you more money, you have to give them less product for the same money. If it's going to cost you more, you actually just have to cut some expenses somewhere. And here's what's really interesting. The key decision makers that would reduce these costs are these producers. So the point being that the people creating the problem actually can solve the same problem for you. So you would tell that producer, hey, that's the kind of work that we want the producer to do.
You know, what's interesting, Tim, is that reminds me of a game that I've played before back in my day, but also on behalf of some clients, where there's a big job that comes up and we don't have a producer that can tackle this job, and the budget is the budget and we're not sure what to do. And I say, well, just go hire that freelance producer. And they say, we can't afford it. I say, that's their problem to figure out. Give them the direct costs and say, hey, if you can pay for yourself in this budget, the job's yours. If you can't, then we'll go find somebody that can figure that out. And it's amazing how many producers are like, oh, I'll figure that out. Trust me. This is what I do all day.
Yeah. It really is. No matter what the situation is, the resource is finite. So with a finite resource, what you have to do is make decisions to make the shoe fit on Cinderella's foot, right? That's what we have to do. So there are decisions creatively, there's decisions on delivery and delivery dates, how many rounds of revisions you can have, what you pay the freelancer, how often you use that freelancer. There's a lot of tools that a producer can leverage going into that problem. But I'll just say this, solve the problem. You have to solve a problem anyway, just make this the problem you're solving along the way, and you'll still hit your goals. Most important to me is going back to that idea, if you give away your indirect right now to direct, and then your indirect costs go up in the future, because they will, you've basically just lost ground that is very hard to get back. So it's best to keep your percentages where they are and start solving the real problem. We'll say the real future that you're going to have, start solving it now. That way you're better at solving your future problem when it actually comes down to critical issues and indirect, and you'll be smooth sailing still. If you avoid it, put your head in the sand, you're going to hit it eventually and you'll be behind the 8 ball.
Would your reference meaning actually supposed to say, squeeze one of the evil stepsisters' foot into Cinderella's shoes?
That's what it is. Cut off the toes to fit the feet. That's right. Maybe you're right. The wrong person.
He's been there. So any suggestions on, I love that thought you said of like, this is ground that's very hard to get back, right? Like once you give up this ground a year from now, when you're wondering, gosh, why did I get into this situation where direct costs are so heavy? How do I undo this? Do you have any tips, ideas, suggestions? What can people do that are thinking, I'm starting to feel this pressure, or when I do, what are my decision points?
Yeah, well said. So Scott's asking a similar problem too. So here's the way I coach my clients into thinking about this. Number one, have a production meeting. Get this information out as soon as possible. Be very proactive on what it takes to manage those clients' expectation and get everyone on the same page from the beginning, including if you're the creative business owner, have yourself manage in those expectations too. So let's get that visibility as soon as possible. And as the project unrolls itself out over week, be active in that problem solving. What you're really doing is developing a muscle, right? And that practice of that muscle, things get more fine-tuned and better. And that proactive nature to it really is the aspect you're looking at. How do I actually get through and start managing these decisions in new ways. I believe us humans were innately lazy. Maybe I don't want to say those words. That's why I slow down a little bit. But what we want is least resistance. So if I can take it easy on myself, I will. If I can take it easy on my employees, I will. So that the first time you're going at this friction you're creating develops a muscle that over time you can find less resistance there. But don't be afraid of acting for a little while and really start working this thing out, knowing that your objectives in the future are to loosen the reins again. But you're going to have to find a new technique or a new way of thinking or a new process for the decision making, and you have to put it into practice. It's really the only way to do it. And so have regular meetings discussing that and be on the same side as your producer. Support that producer to make them successful. Support your team to make.
Uh-oh. Tim's stuck. Thank you for the heads up, Lydia. Well, I was actually going to chime in once Tim comes back, but one thing I'm hearing is what I call, not affectionately, is the squeeze. And that is, if you're the owner here in the middle, on this side, you have clients and their demands and their requirements. On this side, what do you have? You have resources, meaning you have your talent, your staff, freelancers, and so forth. And both of them are wanting something from you, right? The clients are wanting more, your talent and your labor is wanting more. And as they keep raising the stakes, you're caught in the middle. And this is where oftentimes you feel like, as the owner, you're just the rock. You're stuck between the rock and the hard place, right? Both sides, trying to keep them both happy. And what I'll say is, by the way, are you back, Tim? He's not back yet. Is part of the reason we're such believers at revThink in this idea of the best way to deal with the future is to create it. It's this proactive stance that if you take a proactive stance in terms of how you go after clients and new business and so forth, you have a steady stream of opportunities and better clients. You're always upgrading your clients. Well, in the same sense, as companies grow and evolve, that resource side becomes just as important. And I have some owners who have a talent pipeline where they're constantly nurturing dozens of people so that when the time comes and they need to hire that producer, for example, and someone throws out this really high number, they say, well, we'll consider that, but we have 2 other candidates, and hopefully they've got a great candidate that's a better fit, and it's not about the money. So just remember that sometimes solving the problem today is really tricky, but solving it for the long term may just be about developing and taking a more proactive posture. Okay, well, with that, I know we're at our 2 minutes past our allotted time. I don't know if Tim's going to make it back or not. In terms of if this was helpful to you, that factors report that Tim shared with you, that's something that we do as a free courtesy to any owner that is just curious to see their numbers in a new way, in a way that's more meaningful than perhaps a P&L and a balance sheet that your bookkeeper maybe hands you and you think, okay, what do I do with this? So if that's something you're interested in, just feel to reach out to me or Tim, and we'll get you turned on to that. Also, a reminder that we're doing the Fishbowl event tonight. So if you guys can show up and support us there, join the conversation, we would certainly love to have you. And keep the conversation going in revCommunity. I know all of you here are members because that's how you got into this event. So we'll post this replay in revCommunity. And if you have questions or comments and you want to go deeper, let's start a thread there and get you the help you need. All right, everyone. Oh, what Fishbowl event? Go to if you go to my social feed, either on Instagram or LinkedIn, you'll see the event there, Eric. And got it. I'm looking at the comments. I'm trying to decide whether or not to dive into them. But out of respect for everyone's schedule, I'm going to adjourn for us this week. I want to say thank you to everyone that made it here today. Thanks for putting up with that extra registration step. We may be doing that more frequently in the future. So if you see that, that's what that's about. We want to try and keep these conversations intimate and be able to get into some fairly delicate or raw topics that might not be something we want to just share with the big wide world Because if one of your employees dropped into this, they may get the wrong impression. So we want to, of course, manage that. All right, thanks everyone. Appreciate you all being here. Make it a great rest of your week, and we'll see you next week for another weekly briefing, and we'll see you in the community. Thanks everyone.